Alright. So, hello everyone, and welcome to the San Anselmo Library's virtual event today, Fire Smarting an Established Native Plant Garden with Marin Master Gardener Bob Mauceli. I'm Sarah Yana, the Adult Services Librarian at the San Anselmo Public Library. Before we begin, I'd like to thank the Friends of the Library and the Library Parcel Tax for always supporting the library. There are a few technical things I'd like to mention before we begin. Everyone will remain muted throughout the presentation. If you have a question for Bob, please type it into the chat box at the bottom or top of your screen, depending on where you have the functions located and what device you are using. All questions will be answered at the end of the presentation, but please feel free to ask questions throughout using the chat box, and we'll just get to them at the end of the presentation. I recommend selecting the full screen and speaker view settings. This can be found in the top right corner of your screen or on the left-hand side or on the bottom, depending on your device. During the presentation, you might see some faces on the right side in a column. You can choose to minimize this column or just show the speaker's face using the horizontal lines at the top of the column. This program does count towards 1 continuing education credit with the Marin Master Gardeners. And thank you so much for your patience and understanding during this program. Technology can be really fickle, and we're all still learning what we can and can't do with Zoom. If you have any questions or need help with Zoom, email me at sleyland@townofsananselmo.org. It's the same email you used to register for this event, or you can use the chat box and send me a personal chat. Our speaker today is Bob Mauceli. Before becoming a Marin Master Gardener in 2014, Bob was a Master Gardener for 9 years in New York. He lives on a North Nevada hillside that has 21 Tuscan olive trees and is landscaped using native trees, shrubs, ground covers, and perennials. His study of the native California environment led him to learn more about the threats to it from invasive organisms of all kinds. Bob is a member of the California Native Plant Society and is a birder. He has built natural habitats in all of the places he and his family have ever lived. Welcome, Bob. Woo! Yay.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Now I'm going to try to share my screen and see what we can do here, how much trouble I can get in. And I hope this is the right one. I think so. Okay. Now, that didn't work, but I'll try it again. I am share screen. Okay, good. So now I need to see it.
Oh no, what happened?
I managed to share the screen, but now I can't find the screen anymore. So
okay. Do you see it now, Bob?
No, I don't.
Okay, let's stop sharing and start over with that. Okay.
I still cannot see it.
So I see your screen. So you can't see it?
No, let me see if I can. Yes, now I can.
Okay, great. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Yes. Okay, so about this presentation, you know, there's been a lot of talk and concern about how to deal with gardens and landscapes in Marin in an increasingly long and intense California fire season. One could even say a legendary fire season. And people are concerned and have been concerned that proposed code and local ordinance changes will require some severe changes and reductions in the size and content of their gardens to try to reduce a fire hazard risk throughout the county. UC Master Gardeners, on the other hand, believe that healthy gardens are an important component of a biodiverse and healthy ecology. And that's really important to us. And so we have developed a series of fire smart principles to help reduce landscape fire risk without serious reduction or elimination of garden and landscape plantings. Following these principles, we think, can help you deal with fire risk while still maintaining a healthy and beautiful landscape. And that's really important. So the subject of this presentation is mainly the work that my wife and I have done and are doing to reduce fire hazard risk in our landscape without completely destroying it. My colleague, Jim Casper, and I prepared the first MMG FireWise presentation that we gave in Mill Valley in August 2019. And that was shortly after the Mill Valley Town Council had announced a new landscape code that involved possibly significant vegetation reduction in home gardens and landscapes. We got a lot of questions about that. In fact, we spent 45 minutes to an hour answering questions about that because people were really concerned about that would do to their houses aesthetically and frankly, monetarily. The idea of this presentation grew out of that and out of the fire risk reduction work that I had started in the winter of 2018 on my home. So my hope for this presentation is to give you some ideas as to how you might go about doing that as well. One of the things that we found from this and other early presentations that we made was that it really helped to show examples of what could be done both before and after. And this is a work in progress, and I mean that literally. It's actively continuing this fall. An aside right now, it's somewhat amusing unless you live here. You may hear some knocking going on during this presentation. I can do nothing about that knocking. We share this property with a colony of acorn woodpeckers. There's about 12 to 15 of them. This is acorn season. They are filling their granaries, and for some reason, they believe this house is part of their granary, and they are putting, well, I would guess now about 1,000 holes in it. So we're now actively, you will hear later in this presentation that we're actively looking at doing a hardy board resiting. And we hope that that actually produces a lot of bent bills around here. Okay, so first a word from our sponsor. Master gardeners are trained volunteers who share their knowledge and skills with the public. We've been through training, but in the reality is that most master gardeners have been active gardeners for many, many years. In fact, perhaps most of their adult lives. We're part of the UC Cooperative Extension. And as such, we provide unbiased research-based information to homeowners on home horticulture, pest management, and sustainable gardening practices. Our website is a really great resource for lots of information on these topics and more, including fire smart landscaping. And in this time, in this time of COVID, our office is closed, but you can reach our remote help desk by sending an email to the email address on this slide. You might want to take a shot of this slide because it's got the URL for our website as well as the email for the help desk. So our guiding premise is that our home landscapes are important, and they're important elements of a healthy environment and ecology in Marin County. And they are worth providing because of that. They can enhance plant and wildlife biodiversity by providing important habitats for those: food, water, and shelter for wildlife, and habitat corridors for all wildlife and plants. They reduce our ecological impact on our environment. They help with water use, soil improvement, and the reduction in the use of chemicals. And they provide natural services, including reducing water runoff, erosion, sequestering carbon and producing oxygen, and increasing soil health. So we took that to do something about our property. From this, which was a mostly weedy, barren landscape of about 6/10 of an acre on a steep, hot, south-facing hill of mostly hard clay, but with 10 beautiful, mature valley oaks and 21 relatively young olive trees. And building around those oaks and olives, we changed that to this, about a 4 to 5/10 acre of a garden of about 65% of native plants, like this, and like this, and this, and this. And with about 60 to 70 species and cultivars of native and Mediterranean plants, a small sample of which are these. We've got here in clockwise, starting in the upper left, Howard McMinn manzanita, spring showers, pink flowering currant, Ken Taylor fremontia, and bees bliss sage, all in bloom. And these ceanothus, again, in the upper left, Dark Star, next to it, Ray Hartman. Lower right is Anchor Bay, and lower left is Anchor Bay, and lower right is Concha. My wife says, I've never met a ceanothus I didn't like. She's right. We grow 10 to 15 varieties. And these perennials, California fuchsia, these are red flowered buckwheat, and these are Pozo blue sage. This is coyote mint, and these are native chaparral clematis. So we have wildflowers. We didn't plant these just showed up and we love them. This is harvest or ground brodia. I can't tell the difference. These are California buttercups. These are blue dicks, and these are elegant Clarkia. We have about 5 species of Clarkia on here. It was here, it's been here, and we love it. So biodiversity, well, healthy plants, healthy gardens help build biodiversity. We think we are on our way to doing that. These are some of the birds we share it with. We've got 75 species on our yard list. That's about 1/3 of the number of species on the Marin County species list. And this season, we had nesters, about 20 to 24 of those species were nesting, including quail, both California and spotted towhees, and actually all of the birds in this picture. Okay, at least 8 identified species of native bees and pollinators, and hundreds, literally hundreds of individuals working the flowers in the spring and through the summer. And then butterflies. We've identified 25 species of butterflies and 4 species of moths. The small sample of them are on here. We've got a concern in that the number of individuals, especially in some species, has dropped off precipitously here in the last 2 to 3 years. But we'll talk more about that later. And then finally, we got a bunch of good guys. We call them the bad guys patrol. They keep down the bad insects and things we don't like about this. And so we have praying manti. Here's a female laying eggs. And we have a bevy of chorus frogs that in the winter through about mid-spring entertain us with their nightly singing above our water feature, which then has tadpoles into the summer and lots of little frogs later. So we think we're building biodiversity by building the healthy garden that we have. But it all begins with the plant. A healthy residential landscape is a result of providing the best horticultural and gardening practices for your yard. And there is a lot of material on our website about these best practices, especially for plant health. So I recommend you go there. But the important thing to think about too is that healthy plants throughout the landscape will be more resilient to embers and heat from flames from a wildland fire. And therefore this resiliency will help you build a fire smart landscape. So some of the elements to consider in doing that are, first of all, making sure your garden is in synchronization with the environment around it, with the plant community you're in, the microclimate you're in, the sun exposure you've got, the quality of soil, and so on. Then we think about making sure that the plants that we use are in the right place. Namely, are they in sync with your environment? And also, are they in the right place vis-a-vis the other plants in the garden? And then finally, we think about the good maintenance and appropriate irrigation that will allow you to maintain a fire smart and healthy garden. Since I'm a member of the Marin Master Gardener Native Plant Guild, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that you should think about using native plants in your garden. The value of that is that they'll go a long way towards helping you to build garden health and resiliency. They're in sync with the Marin environments. They build biodiversity because they're visited more by wildlife and in fact required by native butterflies. And they improve garden sustainability using less water, chemicals, and being in tune with the sync of the environment. This migrating male Rufous hummingbird knew that and knew what he wanted and appreciated having natives available. On arrival, he headed right for our hummingbird sage to fuel up for his migration to Canada or Alaska. It's amazing that a bird that weighs less than a nickel can fly 2,000 miles in 4 or 5 days to nest in Alaska. We saw one of these nesting in Nome, which is nothing short of amazing. So why native plants? Well, because native plants have co-evolved with our Mediterranean climate, with our geography and topography, with the soil that we've got, however good or bad it is, and with the animals and birds and insects that we have and have had in Marin. So they're all in sync together. And that's the reason why they are more used by wildlife in this area, because they know what they are. So which plants should you choose to use? Which plants should you choose to be fire smart? Well, safe or unsafe plant lists might not help you make that choice, because none are science-based or peer-reviewed. In reality, all plants will burn, but not all plants are bad. The lists of fire-prone and plant lists really are not help. And our UC Cooperative Extension Environmental Horticulture Advisor for Marin and Sonoma counties has said the following. So when creating a fire smart landscape, we advise homeowners to design defensible space and maintain their landscapes according to UC Marin Master Gardener guidelines. For new or renovated landscape, consider native, there's that word again, or other pollinator-friendly plants that require little water and are easy to maintain. There are no published fire-wise or fire-resistant plant lists that are science-based and peer-reviewed. Design and maintenance are more important than plant selection. So the real answer is that you should choose plants, native or non-native, that are in sync with your environment and that you will enjoy looking at for as long as they live. So again, what to look for in a plant? Well, right plant, right place. That's the mantra that master gardeners live by, and it prevents you from doing things like planting a redwood in your Novato backyard of 30 to 70, 30 by 70 feet, and have it grudgingly grow to about 40 or 50 feet and dominate the entire yard. Plant plants that are water-wise, because we don't have a lot of it. We're not going to get any more of it. In fact, we're probably going to get less of it. And so therefore, it's a precious resource, and we want to use as little of it as we can. Please plant plants that are pollinator friendly, as I'm going to talk about later in this. That's a problem right now. And for healthy and genetically diverse ecosystems, we need them in the food chain. And plant plants that are well behaved. Please, even though you can buy them, don't buy plants that are exotic invasives like English ivy. And don't buy plants that are going to create lots of dead, dry, dying branches or debris. And did I say consider native plants? Well, you bet, because native plants check most of the, in fact, all of the good boxes on this list, and very few of the bad ones. And I got to tell you that the anise swallowtail, who is on the Pozo blue sage, they knew that, she knew that, and so should you. They might be among some of the best choices that you might make to put into a healthy and a fire smart um, garden. So let's think about reducing home wildfire risk, because that's what the rest of this presentation, including what I'm doing with my home, is all about. Fire smart landscape principles have been developed by our MMG product team. They are guiding the work that I am doing on fire smarting my landscape. So a brief description of what they are and what led to them is in order. You know, if you haven't slept for the first 9 months of this year, you know that California wildfires are becoming more frequent, more intense, and more destructive. And the question is, why is that happening? Well, it's first of all, it's climate change. Things are becoming drier, more extreme, and that's being translated into more flammability in the wild areas of this state and other states. But it also means human activity. There's more development in the wildland-urban interface. There's more wildland vegetation because of mistakes that we have made, perhaps in reducing the controlled burning and other management of our wildland. And there are more ignitions. When there's more people out there in the, as we call it, WUI, there's more chances that a problem could happen. And it could happen here. And the reason for that is that 80% of Marin's area is designated as having moderate to very high fire hazard severity ratings. And most of those with very high fire hazard severity ratings are in the wildland-urban interface. And that represents about 65% of the living units in Marin. They are the ones that are in, about 69,000 living units, of which mine is one. And that's the reason I'm spending money, time, and effort on changing what we've got here to protect against that. The serious issue, of course, is, you know, in a critical fire area, how do you lower fire risk for a home and its landscape? And the answer is you start at the house and work out. But first, you prepare for a fire. You should contact, if you haven't already, your local fire agency and Fire Safe Marin. Their website is www.firesafemarin, all one word, .org, for information about evacuations and preparations needed to do so. Go bags, thing to take, routes to follow, communications, safe places, and more. If you haven't done this, start now. And I mean, as soon as we're through with this presentation, start now. Second, start at the house and work out. The best strategy for minimizing damage from wildfires is to manage on a long-term basis the structural conditions that fuel a fire. And I'm sorry to say that in many cases, the biggest piece of fuel for a fire on your property is your home. So harden it and other structures on the property. Create defensible space around the structures and create a fire-smart landscape to further reduce fire risk in that defensible space. Now master gardeners are not trained to talk about the details of hardening your home. And I'm learning a lot by trying to do that right now. And I didn't know a lot about it, frankly. We're trained to provide research-based information on all areas of health, public health, plant health and gardening practices. So it's important that you learn about how to harden your home, and there are many resources available to help you. There are UCNA, there is UC websites on this. There's Marin, Fire Safe Marin website, and your local fire department. And it's important that you educate yourself about these things. So, in reducing a landscape fire risk, how we do our gardens and landscapes is more important than the plants that we choose. Defensible space and the right plants in the right places with the right care is the way to deal with it. What does that mean? Well, we've set up some principles, and this is the mantra that I'm following as best I can in the work that I'm going to describe. So let me explain. First, plan and create defensible space. That includes the potentially flammable objects in that space, like trash bins, wood piles, tree and other garden debris, mulch, even your plastic or organic doormats, and yes, including the plants. Second, deal with the plants as potential fuel in the landscape. Think about their placement, their spacing, their separation to reduce fire spread. Grouping plants together and building fire breaks between the groups, limbing up trees and pruning shrubs to reduce fire ladders, and the pruning, maintenance, irrigation needed to keep a healthy garden healthy and fire safe. And because my property is on a steep hill, boy is it steep, I'm also trying to honor these separation recommendations. This may be more difficult because many of the existing plantings that have been done here have been done to protect against erosion. And removing plants to meet these recommendations, particularly 30 feet between things, may give me a real problem and damage that protection. So we'll probably need to get a consultation with a landscape architect before we start doing things like that. As most of the affected plants in the most steep areas are more than 50 feet from this house, delaying this work until we can do that may be okay. Because you can see these are some pretty sporting differences here. I've got shrubs that are, if I put them 6 times apart, their width apart or height apart, they would be 30 feet apart, and I would have a barren hillside. So that just doesn't make any sense. Okay, so here's how to think about organizing for a fire smart landscape. This is where you see Marin Master Gardeners and help desk volunteers in Novato can help with advice and answering your questions. Defensible space is only part of a larger landscape management strategy. It's designed mainly to protect your home and property. The general surroundings leading up to your home must be considered as part of your wildfire preparedness planning. And so a note about zones. The number of feet in these zones is less important than the idea is what is immediate versus intermediate in terms of proximity to your home. So let's talk about this. First of all, we have zone 0. That's the immediate zone, and we'll talk about why it's immediate in just a bit. And then we have zone 1, a little further away from the structures. Here's zone 0, here's zone 1, 5 to 30 feet away, and then the extended zone, which is 30 or more feet away. And given what happens in Marin in terms of, the almost typical property side, that zone 2 is supposed to extend out to 100 feet. And what that means is you're going to have to work with your neighbors on that, because you and your neighbors will share in large part this space. And you both need to deal with it. So following these guidelines reduces your risk, but it doesn't eliminate it. Nothing is fireproof. What we are trying to do is reduce fire hazard risk. So perhaps we can make it through a wildfire if one comes. To begin with, start now with zone 0, and that's 0 to 5 feet from the house. And I do mean now. If you haven't done any work on your home, this is the place to start, and you can start now. Now, why do I say that? The reason I say that is because this area is responsible for most structures being damaged or destroyed by wildfire. What does that mean? What that means is that direct flame can come and damage your house in a wildfire, but often it's moving so fast or not hot enough that it will set your house on fire. Radiant heat, it can be generated, and in fact, in many cases, in the recent fires in Sonoma and Napa, it was generated from burning structures on either side of homes as the fire moved through. And it can be hot enough to ignite a house without direct flame contact. And then finally, embers. Embers are responsible for most damage during wildfires. And embers tend to accumulate in the area around the foundation of the wildfire. They can travel more than a mile ahead of the wildfire, and they hit the house and fall right to the ground, and that's right in the area from 0 to 5 feet from the house. So we started there. No flammable mulch, fencing, or furniture in that area. No dead branches. No roof litter. No tall plants under eaves. The reason why is the flames from plants that might be under eaves can rise 2 to 3 times the height of the plant. So a shrub that's 2 feet high could have 4 to 6 feet above it in flame, and a shrub that's 3 feet high could be 6 to 9 feet. That's enough if it's in front of a window to break the window and allow embers to enter the house, or to get under the eaves and start a fire in that area. Nothing flammable attached to the house. I've got 2 gates from fences that go around the house here to separate us from the Rush Creek Open Space Preserve. Those will burn, and they're attached to the house, and so we're taking action to eliminate that junction. And then finally, no branches within 10 feet of the roof or from the chimney. And in many of the towns in Marin County, that's now code. And so you really need to understand what the code is and deal with that. The thing is that ordinances vary by city and insurance company. So if there's anything in this area that you would use to start a campfire, it behooves you to remove it. And your evacuation route is as important as your house and the landscaping, because along the evacuation route has to be considered in the context of where you live, because it relates how you might get out of there. And so if you need help with any of this, contact your local fire department and ask to speak with the vegetation manager or vegetation management specialist, and they will give you help. We're ready. But you don't want or need this. To be fire smarting your home doesn't mean to be getting rid of everything. In fact, that could exacerbate the problem through exotic and invasive weed growth, stressed trees, and other situations brought on by the unhealthy landscape created by such extreme treatment. So what do you consider when you want to think about this area? Well, the first thing is, within 5 feet of the home, use non-combustible mulch like stone, gravel, pavers, or decomposed granite. Secondly, use plants like succulents or low-growing plants that are non-woody and well irrigated. Because if the embers were to fall in this area, they won't burn at all. If they were to fall in among the strawberry plants, well, heck, those are only about 8 inches tall. So 2 to 3 times that is probably not going to bother the siding on my house. Make sure that you think about this. Just because you want something compact doesn't really mean that you're limited only to flowering herbaceous perennials. Dwarf shrubs can be used. Slow growing ornamental grasses can add an active touch to this as they blow in the wind and provide a background for some of the lower plants that you might use in this area. So these are the kinds of things that mitigate against fire and yet don't destroy the look that you want around your home. I'd like you to think about making a lot of those plants that you use California natives. Bonnie, am I doing a good job of selling this stuff? Here's my home in Novato. Wood siding, but with a Class A roof, metal gutters, and twin pane windows. We don't think they're fire resistant, but having twin pane will help. Those are all good things. The wood siding isn't so good, and we're dealing with that. There were 2 trees close to the walls. Here, you can't see it because it hadn't leafed out yet, is an ornamental pear whose branches were actually touching this area of the house. And a valley oak was behind this live oak, and its branches were almost touching the house, and it was still only about 8 inches in diameter, so that represented a problem. And then over here, we had a neighbor's tall and possibly dying hedge that was also overgrowing within a few feet of the east side of the home. Foundation plants were tall and dense and touching the walls of the house, like these. And some of them, particularly in the back, were large rosemary and lavender plants, which were the first to go. But we still planted their replacements too close to the walls, and so that had to be changed. And we had plastic trash bins, storage shelves, firewood, and workbenches near to and against the exterior walls. So the easy stuff went quickly. Firewood was burned in our fireplace and not replaced. the trash bins, storage shelves, workbenches near or against the exterior walls were moved away at least 10 feet from these. We have installed 6 reels of 100-foot hose lines and 5 high-capacity pulsating tripod sprinklers to all of the lower hose bibs in the house to irrigate the grounds once to twice a month in summer, but more important, to give firefighters something to defend our home with if it came to that. That was a recommendation that was made by our vegetation management specialist here in the Novato Fire District. And we've taken that to our hearts. So we started with the foundation plants, and that were, close to the house or under windows or under eaves, and like these. And we took them out. And we replaced them with some actually pretty good looking pebbles. We were lucky enough to find a pebble mix that, sort of matched the color of the house color, which we liked. Here we have some rose bushes and fine-leaved plants that were growing very tall, under windows, under eaves, and right up against the side of the house. And we removed them and replaced them with pebbles. So between the pebbles and the decomposed granite walk, that gives us a good 10 feet away from any vegetation. And while we were doing that, we replaced our regular foundation vents with fire-resistant foundation vents all the way around the house. That was 14 of them. And we're now in the process of replacing our existing wood siding with hardy board, fire, and we hope acorn woodpecker resistant siding, and also installing fire-resistant soffit and gable vents. And as I said, I think the acorn woodpeckers are tuned in now because they've stopped banging on the walls for a bit, I hope. As I mentioned before, these foundation plants were densely planted with rosemary and lavender, and it had grown up about that high. We removed those and we replaced them with coral bells and catmint and herbs, but we really didn't provide, and my wife's strawberry garden, but we didn't really provide for any space between any of these plants and the siding. And so we changed that. We put pebbles in a trough about 3 feet away from the side of the house, and then replanted the low growing plants that we had in here before. So this gave us good separation, and yet in certain times of the year, it looks pretty nice. We planted this with coral bells, low growing salvia, and catmint and herbs. It looks beautiful in spring and through about the month of July and into August, June and into August. And we enjoy it, but so do the bees, hummingbirds, butterflies, and hoverflies enjoy it too. And it looks beautiful then, but it's fire smart pruned now, so that we feel actually pretty comfortable with this. So we think we have dealt with the immediate problems around our home, and we're continuing work on that. But now we have to think about 5 feet and beyond. And we need to consider not only us, but we need to consider the needs in thinking about that of firefighters who might be trying to gain access to our property to protect it. And so we know that at 30 feet, flames that might happen in the garden are much less likely to ignite the house. But that's one of the main reasons why you have to do something about it. Can the firefighters get in there to fight the fire and prevent it from spreading from our house to other homes? Maintenance is key here. So what we want to think about are low, well-irrigated plants close to the house. Let's say from 5 to 15 feet. 10 feet to that from and beyond, larger shrubs and trees. 30 foot are optimal. I don't know what I'm going to do about my 45-foot tall heritage oaks, but we'll deal with that. 30 foot from the house, we can use wood mulch. Closer in, using compost or composted wood mulch is probably safer in terms of fire danger. Hardscape, where you can, use them as fuel breaks between the plantings and allow vertical and horizontal space between the shrubs and trees, especially on slopes, and make it as big as you can make it. All plants should be available and accessible for cleanup, maintenance, and irrigation. And maintenance is key here. It is the key determinant of what a fire-smart garden can be. Your evacuation route is as important as your house, and the landscaping along the evacuation route needs to be considered. And in our case, that landscaping is along a 126-foot long driveway. And we're making sure that we can get out and that the local fire department can get in. And so this is where you may need to work with neighbors. And I'll talk about that in the next slide. So the first thing you want to do is where you've got open space, you want to mow grass and weeds. The grass and weeds underneath these olive trees can grow 4 feet high. And this distance is about 50 to 60 feet away. That's too close. And so you're looking north here, you're looking into the Rush Creek Open Space Preserve. We usually mow twice. We do it once on the north side and west side of our property in April, and again in late May to mid-June. And we do it every year without fail. The fence in back divides us from the open space, and Marin County's Rush Creek Open Space Preserve mows an additional 15 to 20 yards beyond that fence. On our west side, which is over here, the boundary between us and them is only 30 to 40 feet from the house. Here, they mow more than 30 to 40 yards away from the fence, usually by mid-June. We work with our neighbor. They're a good one. This is a view of the front of the property, looking towards our neighbor on the right. Think about what your reaction is. Is it good or bad? Does it look okay or doesn't it? Well, let me tell you, that's an after picture. Here's the before photo. A large acacia hedge, about 40 feet long, and massed cotoneaster an evil exotic invasive, and low-growing live oak trees, all of which combined to make a serious fire ladder on this relatively steep driveway that needed work. So we took it out. The acacia and cotoneaster were removed from under the live oaks, and the oaks were limbed up to about 10 to 12 feet above grade to deal with the fire ladder. But I also removed an important privacy screen and bird habitat. And actually, the bird habitat that existed there was one reason we bought the home. So that was a bummer, but it had to go. However, guess what? An added bonus. Surprise, surprise. In the spring of 2019, after we had done that, a few small arroyo lupin and California poppy plants volunteered in the now cleared space. Those wildflower seeds must have been waiting for years to be set free from under the acacia and cotoneaster. We let those seeds go to seed. We let those plants go to seed. And that fall, we added some seed of each of those species on our own. And look at what we got in the following spring. 40 feet of arroyo lupin, California poppies, and some unexpected species of Clarkia. It's pretty. They started blooming in early to mid-February and continued to late April, early May. And then we cut them down for seed for the following year and to make this area fire smart. Truly fire smart. It's beautiful and it's safe. Even after removing the acacia and cotoneaster and the tree, the oak tree that was right here beyond this fence, all right up against the house. Even right after removing that, my neighbor's large Myoporum hedge was still overgrown into my yard. You're looking at it here from the front of the house. And since it was completely infested with Myoporum thrips, there was significant dead or dying wood from their activity. And you can see that down in here, looking at this area from the front. Looking at it back, the hedge being very tall, almost 2 stories tall, was overhanging all of this area and growing towards our shed and towards the house. So this was something that was a critical fire problem for us. We trimmed on the property line. We trimmed the hedge on the property line from my side of the fence. We did not go into their property. And here's what it now looks like from the front. It's good and clear and away from the house. And here's what it looks like from the back. It's still too tall. It still overhangs, and it's still largely dead wood below the very tops. This was a Syria fire risk that has at least been partially reduced. Somewhat more fire safe, but still not great because of the dying wood and the height of the shrub. I've offered to pay for the removal of the stubs that were left because we couldn't get into the property to cut it off right at the trunk of these. But I still don't know what, if anything, my neighbor is going to do about, if it's dangerous for me, it's got to be dangerous for him too. So we've got 10 valley oaks whose low-lying branches, like these, were touching the ground, literally touching the ground. And therefore, we were concerned with these plants in front of it that this could become a fire ladder. So we had a certified arborist, and I would recommend if you do this kind of work, you have a certified arborist do it and not try to do it yourself. We had him limb these trees up to about 10 to 15 feet off the grade. It looks pretty nice. In fact, the trees are lit by lamps from underneath at night. And the height has provided strikingly more dramatic views of it at night than during the day. If you think it's striking with the foliage, it's really striking when they drop their leaves and it shines up into the bare branches. It also has provided better condition for and the ability, more ability or easier ability to maintain the plants that grow around, under and around the oak trees. So we think that's a win-win, and we're going to keep them that way. Under the oak trees farther out in zone 2, we had planted some prostrate leptospermum. One reason was to provide erosion control on a steep portion of the garden. Another reason was that they had beautiful white flowers that bloomed in the spring under the shade of the oaks that overhung this area. So actually, it was a bad choice. Wrong plant in the wrong place. These had become overgrown and twiggy. They were in an area that was difficult to maintain them, especially to prune out dead wood. And with their needle-like fine foliage, it all added up to a serious potential fire hazard. They're gone now. We'll put wattles on the hill this fall to hold it if we get rain, and I hope we get rain. And we'll plant with low growing and low maintenance or easy to maintain plants, possibly hummingbird sage, maybe some low growing ribes or manzanita. Here, the buddleia on the left and the Salvia brandegii, and I know that I didn't pronounce that right, on the right, are valuable pollinator plants. They are loaded with bees and butterflies and some hummingbirds in the spring and early summer. But they had both become really overgrown, too tall, and too twiggy. And since they're under valley oaks, we were again concerned about that. They've now been reduced in height. They've now been pruned out in the center, and they've been reduced in separation. So we've got good separation vertically and horizontally here. The dead wood has been removed, and we can actually get to see our beautiful Monica manzanita, which we've been culturing. If they can't be kept clean and controlled, they'll be replaced with easier to maintain pollinator friendly plants because we want to keep those babies coming. Continuing work on the hill, we've opened up some dense plantings. We've provided spacing between them so that we can reduce the spread of them. There's nothing above them, so we don't really have to worry about height, but we do worry about this very steep hill going right on up and over into the open space. Work to be done. There's always work to be done in a garden. And the first thing that we think about is this bears repeating. What we did before in the rest of the garden, we've got to do now in the work that needs to be done. So about 30 feet from the house, we have a large planting of Baccharis, Pigeon Point, and Twin Peaks, which are, ground cover versions of coyote bush. It was planted to hold a particularly steep area of the hill and prevent it from sliding down onto our patio and into our water feature. And some fire agencies have in the past, at least, also considered such plantings as a fire break, if it's kept cheered and hydrated, which we do. So the point is that something's got to be done about it, because our planting may have overachieved. And we're going to experiment with more shearing of it, and possibly some removal of some plants around the very edge of it, in order to see if we can provide some spacing. As I said previously, it does get watered 1 to 2 times per month in the summer with overhead sprinklers in order to hopefully keep it as a fire break as well as a hill holder. It would be difficult to be replaced for the following reasons. First, it really does provide important erosion control. The steepness of this hill in this area, it's 100% grade, which means it's at a 45-degree angle. And that's really steep. It also, if it will be sort of a fire break, we'd love to have that, because it will protect all of the other plantings behind it and on up the hill. It also has been and continues to be a nesting refuge for California quail, California and spotted towhees, and other kind of skulker birds who like to hide when they're breeding. In this area here, we had a pair of quail produce 15 to 20 young. Over here, we had another pair of about 10 young. And then in the late summer, they formed a large covey. And it was just amazing to see them and the babies running around all over the place. Over here, we believe that we had a spotted towhee growing or breeding, and we continually see our California towhees running in and out from under this. And in the fall, it provides a refuge for the white-crowned and golden-crowned sparrows that spend the winter with us. So finally, when in bloom, and that's right now, it's in full bloom right now, it has in the past attracted hordes, and I mean hordes, of butterflies and other pollinators. Sadly, there seems to be an insect apocalypse here in North Novato. When it was in bloom in 2016, this planting attracted hundreds of butterflies and beneficial insects.
Bob, I'm sorry to interrupt you. There's a question that they can't see where you're pointing to in this picture when you're talking about the plants. So
They can't see this?
They can see the photo. They can't. You're saying over when.
Oh, they can't see the pointer.
They can't see the pointer. No.
Okay, all right. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the upper right-hand area of the large green mass that goes behind these trees and shrubs. That's where the quail had their nests, and then the lower right-hand and central area was where the towhees had their nests, and it's where the white-crowned and golden-crowned sparrows like to spend a lot of time. Does that make it help? Does that help? So in 2016, we had 5 species of skippers. Those are teeny little butterflies. We had Myletta crescent, Ackman blue, common buckeye, cabbage white, and California ringlet, and more. And what appeared to be teeny parasitic wasps and hoverflies. And one afternoon, I was sitting out there with a beer, and I counted at least 100 common buckeye alone working in the area behind the red leafed shrub in the foreground. And there were many fewer of these insects in 2017 and 2018. But this year, we've seen only one cabbage white, and that was only one time. And we haven't seen more than one or two common buckeye, where we used to see many all year round. So I'm asking if anybody in the audience has any information or idea of what could be going on here, please contact me. My email is bmauceli@comcast.net. My cell phone number is 585-734-3856. Because it looks like somebody, and I don't know who, has thrown a switch that turned off the butterfly machine that serves our area here. The other close to the house is the area around the water feature. Here, I think you can see that these plants have become seriously overgrown. Many of them need to be cut back or more likely removed, and we'll make those decisions based on their value as a pollinator or beneficial insect attracting plants. Further out, we've got a beautiful stand of 6-year-old Lewis Edmonds manzanita up near the fence at top, and below that, a beautiful stand of gravilla, both of which were planted to provide beauty. They're lovely plants, privacy, hill holding, and bird attracting. But both of them need demassification. They're too close together, and they're too close to each other. And that's also true across the path from them of an equally beautiful stand of sunset manzanita running along the edge of the path. These are up a steep part of the hill, and in the case of the sunset manzanita, partially under some limbed up oaks. They're more than 50 feet from the house, but there's still a fire danger. And so we're seeking some aesthetic help to see how we should proceed without denuding this part of the garden. I would hate to lose these plants because they are truly beautiful. So to recap, you do want an attractive green belt around your home. You absolutely do. You don't want what's on the left. You do want something like what's on the right. It's healthier, and a barren landscape creates really serious unintended consequences. On this hill, not the least of which that the hill might end up in my family room in a heavy rainstorm. So what you want to do is you want to take the top illustration, which shows some heavy vegetation close to the house, near the house, on the house, down to the shrubs, and you want to correct it as we're doing. You want to try to create distinct groups separated by mulch or low ground cover or hardscape. You want to thin and trim up your trees. You want to remove shrubs and other vegetation around the house. You want to do that in stages. I don't think anybody should say that they're going to take an entire year and try to do that. But that's the concept. That's the concept I started with, and that's the concept we're trying to implement. And so we think we've done a pretty good job in Zone 0. We've minimized any combustible materials. We've got non-flammable ground cover, and we're using low-growing, well-irrigated plants. So we hope that will be pretty safe. And we think that will give us certainly an edge in terms of protecting the house against fire. Zone 1 and 2, we've got short plants close to the house. We've got larger plants, actually more than 20 feet from the house. We've got hardscape between some plantings for fuel breaks. We need more. That's going to be tough to do on the steep parts of the hill. We need all plants, and we're trying to do that, accessible for maintenance. And we need to continue to maintain vertical and horizontal space between the shrubs and the trees. And we'd like to work with neighbors more for community defensible space. This is a tough neighborhood to do that in because people are pretty private. So we're doing it with a careful eye, though, on preserving the beauty, the health, and habitat and natural services value of the garden. If we didn't do that, we might as well be living in an 8th floor condo on the 8th floor. Maintenance is critical. It's a year-round task. It's ongoing. It's especially important annually before fire season, and every few years, some serious maintenance may need to be done. Routine maintenance ultimately lowers the cost of overall maintenance because, frankly, it costs a lot of money to limb up an oak tree. And if that had been done over the years, it would have been a lot less expensive for me, frankly. We have our landscape service work on this on their maintenance calls every 2 weeks because we think that more important than plant species choice is planning the garden and maintaining it. That's the recipe for a healthy garden that is also fire safe. So clean it up, water it, mulch it, and prune it. Thanks for listening. I have run over a bit, but I hope this has helped you understand that you can make your garden or landscape fire smart without damaging its environmental, its ecological, and its aesthetic value. Questions? And I'd like to leave this up during the questions if there are any.
Sounds good, Bob. Thank you so much for the presenting today, and thank you to the Marin Master Gardeners for all their hard work in making sure that we're getting this information out to the communities in Marin County. It's really great information to have. If you have any questions, now is a great time to put them into the chat box, and Bob can answer them live right now. I just want to let everyone know I will send a follow-up email with some information, including some of the Marin Master Gardener links that Bob has shared today. I will also be including the recording. We are recording this right now. I forgot to mention that at the beginning of the program. But we will, I will be sending everybody who registered a link to the recording if you want to go back over anything Bob mentioned today. Also in this follow-up email will be a short questionnaire / survey from the Marin Master Gardeners. If anyone can fill this out, it helps them plan upcoming presentations for Marin County. I'll send that in the follow-up email, as well as how to get that to the Marin Master Gardeners. So be on the lookout. I should send the follow-up email either later today or early tomorrow morning. And I think that's everything I wanted to mention. Thank you so much, Bob, again. And it looks like we have a few questions in the chat box. Ellen is asking if you could talk more about decomposed wood mulch, how and when you use it, and where you can buy it.
It's basically small wood chips that have been through a couple years composting, and so that makes it gives it a greater ability to store, soak up and store moisture. And so it is much less flammable than just, wood chips that have just been ground up and laid down. I have that kind of mulch well up on the hill and down the driveway. And I use right now mainly just straight compost as a mulch lower down the hill. But I am going to add some of the arborist, as it's called, arborist composted wood mulch in order to get more aeration into the soil. Okay. And you can buy it at most places that have bulk landscape materials.
Okay. Ellen also asked, what if you really don't want to use gravel to mulch with?
You can use pebbles. You can use open soil if you want. Anything else begins to, you could use pavers if you think that's it. But one interesting thing about foundation plants, houses that were built in Europe and in the United States before about 1890 didn't have any foundation plantings. Their house went down to the ground or a small foundation wall. In about the 1890s, houses started to be built with cinder block foundations, and they were ugly. And so landscape designers then said, why don't we hide that with plants? And lo and behold, the foundation planting was built. If you look at pictures of European castles and large mansions in England and other countries in Europe, you will not see any plants growing around their foundation. The gardens are out from the structure, not up against it.
Thank you. We also have a few lovely comments in the chat window for your garden, Bob. One is from Yvette with the Novato Fire Wildlife Mitigation. She's the Novato Fire Wildlife Mitigation Supervisor, and she says that you've done just a beautiful job with your property, and they appreciate the plan you've done to share with everybody. And then Bonnie has said that great job in reminding everyone of the value of native plants in home landscaping. It's so important. Right. Yeah. Right. Does anyone
there of the native?
She's
plants.
There. I see her. Thank you, Bonnie. Anybody else have any questions for Bob before we end our program today? All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I hope you're all staying safe and healthy right now. And happy October. If I don't see anybody, happy Halloween very soon. Yeah. Great. Thank you. Have a great day. Thank you, Bob. Bye.